Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the HR Leaders Podcast, the show where we discuss the future of work with industry experts and HR executives in the world's leading global brands. Today, we have a special guest on the show. We're joined by Dr. Natalie Baumgartner, Chief Workforce Scientist at Achievers. Welcome to the show, Natalie. How are you?
Thanks so much, Chris. I'm lovely. Great to be with you.
Where are you joining us from? Where are you based?
I live in Boulder, Colorado, so the land of the beautiful mountains, and it's the sun's just beginning to come up here.
Oh, so it's not snowing then?
We have snow on the ground, but not snowing actively. You know, around here in Colorado, it's one of the few places I've lived where everybody loves snow because it means you get to go skiing. So,
oh, I wish I could say London was the same. The whole entire city just shut down. You just can't leave your house. We're so unprepared.
right. Yes, I grew up in Chicago, and snow is not something we look forward to, but it's a very different experience living here for sure.
Nice. Is that where you've always lived, or is that like when the pandemic hit, everyone's like, well, I'm leaving the city now, and you ended up there, or is that where you're always based?
Well, I'm from Chicago and then came out actually to Colorado for graduate school and never realized there was a place where the weather could be so wonderful and the sky so blue. So I stayed here. So I've been here over 20 years now.
Wow, amazing. So you're pretty used to working remote then? Does that mean you work remote the whole time?
Yeah, it's true. I mean, since the company that I co-founded, RoundPeg, was acquired by Achievers several years ago, I've been remote since then. So it was never before in my career, but yeah, it's true. The pandemic isn't so different in that respect for me.
Yeah. Well, on that point, give everyone a little more background, sort of your background and journey to where we are now.
Yeah, sure. So I really think of myself as just a self-proclaimed culture and engagement nerd. So I mentioned graduate school, my doctorate's in clinical psychology, but I've worked as a business psychologist my whole career. And I spent the first decade of my career as a consultant, actually, working with executives, mostly C-suite executives and boards of directors around the world with a focus on culture and in the relationship between culture and high organizational performance. And it's really when I fell in love with culture. And I wanted to have a bigger, wider impact than I could, though, by being a consultant and working one company at a time. So I partnered. I live, as I mentioned, in Boulder, Colorado, which is the home of entrepreneurs everywhere. And so partnered with a couple of other really talented folks and developed a software company that would allow every organization to have the opportunity to create cultures where people thrive. So yeah.
Yeah. How do you describe culture? How do you define it?
Yeah, I love that you asked that question because I think there's so many different ways to
Yeah.
define culture. And I think if we're going to actually address culture, we have to have a simple understanding of it, because I think that's where culture gets in trouble. It feels too lofty and nebulous, and no one knows how to attack it quite right, or quite directly, I should say. So I think of culture simply as the way you do things in your company. So it's the small set of values, usually talk about like really small, like 4 to 6 values that define how you wish to do business, how you make decisions, how you develop and hire people. It's the North Star of your organization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. And I always get a different answer, by the way, which is why I asked that question. Every person I speak to describes it completely different, which is always interesting to hear people's perspectives on that. I want to take a second to talk about the Workforce Institute. So tell everyone what that is. There's a lot of really interesting stuff coming out of that. What is your role within the Workforce Institute?
Yeah, so Achievers is a engagement and culture platform, and our mission is to change the way the world works. And I mention that because the Workforce Institute is the science arm of Achievers, and we knew that if we really are dedicated as a technology company to change the way the world works, that we knew that we had to use science to underpin everything we do. And so the Achievers Workforce Institute is a cross-functional team. It includes leaders from our data science team, product team, customer success, and marketing. And we're all really devoted and dedicated to ensuring that everything that we deliver to the business arena, from our software to our thought leadership, is informed by workforce science. The two main things that we focus on are product. So we closely collaborate with a product team to ensure everything we put out into the business arena is rooted in science. And then thought leadership. And you mentioned interesting things coming out of the Institute. And one of our missions is to make it easy, as I mentioned, for every individual to understand culture and engagement and simple best practices that really work. So we spend a lot of time focusing on that as well.
Hmm. Great. So one of the things that our audience has definitely connected with recently and got a lot of value from is your most recent 2020 culture report. Could you share some of the key findings with everyone?
Yes, absolutely. So that commitment that we have to helping everyone within companies thrive meant that we knew that we needed to take a really proactive role in helping organizations understand how to support their people. I mean, always, but especially during this pandemic. So this report came out of the Institute in September, and it's based on a survey of 1,100 people across the US, the UK, Australia, and Canada. And in it, we asked about aspects of culture alignment, both before and then during COVID. And our intent was to really understand what was that relationship between culture and engagement and recognition and the voice of the employee.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so that was the focus of the report. And so we really then dove into our data to understand more about culture alignment and how organizations and people were really experiencing, alignment during the pandemic.
Hmm. What was the key finding that came back from it? Any surprises for you and the team?
Yeah, well, I mean, first I'll just mention when I speak about culture alignment, what I mean is that the degree to which everything you do in your company is aligned to or consistent with that small set of core values that we just talked about. So
Hmm.
we know that organizations that have really strong culture alignment, that companies that hire and develop and engage in accordance with those values, they have higher levels of engagement, lower levels of turnover, greater organizational productivity and profitability. Even they're 6 times more profitable than their competitors. So that's what we were looking into. And we knew that type of alignment was even more important during a crisis. Now, what we found really isn't that surprising, but disheartening, which is that culture alignment has really decreased for organizations during the pandemic. And in some cases we're seeing in the culture arena that overall culture, I mean, so overall engagement is increasing, but culture alignment has decreased. And I think there's a couple of big reasons why. So organizations, as we know, as we've lived, right, have been in crisis mode, and so many of them really, understandably, took their focus off of their values while making these real time decisions. And
Yeah.
in other cases, they were forced to, right, make decisions that were against their values. So a lot of pressure during a crisis. So it's not terribly surprising, but it is a big risk.
Yeah, and I was hearing the same thing. And it's good, hearing it from the report is one thing, and I was also seeing it in some of our customers and even some of my own friends and even my wife's organization, without being too critical, as well. But for me and the team, that was kind of the only thing that was solid. The one thing we could lean into during, whilst everything was going crazy, the one thing that we could operate from is that foundation of our core values. And that I found a lot of strength in that. And I was like, so we're sitting down making decisions about how we're going to get through as a business. And I was like, let's operate from here. Because everything else is kind of up in the air. No one really knows where we're
Yeah.
going, what we're doing. But what we can do is make decisions based on our core values. And that was really helpful for me to understand that why our purpose hasn't changed, just how we get there has is going to be a little bit different. Does that make sense?
Exactly so. And I think that's a great um, model of how to manage through a crisis. And that's why we refer to this concept as culture continuity. So culture continuity is how do you maintain alignment? How do you keep focus on those core values during crisis? And the organizations that do that, even though it can feel a little counterintuitive to some organizations. They may say, well, I'm too busy to think about culture. I can't stop now, or we have to solve this problem today. We
Mm.
can't be slowed down by thinking about our values. When organizations do that, we actually find that they make better decisions, that their employees feel that sense of alignment, and feel just like you said, Chris. They feel more connected. They feel a greater sense of purpose and also a greater sense of confidence in the future.
Yeah, and the same goes for my team and everyone else. They feel more engaged. They understand, the why in the decision. And then that hasn't changed at all. So yes, we're doing it a different way. We're now going virtual rather than physical. But again, the purpose and the values are still aligned to where we're going as well. And that was the only thing I could hold on to, to be completely honest, during all of the chaos that was going
Yeah.
on. At least I can operate from here,
Yes.
from the
Yeah.
sense of purpose. What do you think the impact's going to be on companies that don't do this longer term as we move into next year?
Yeah, I think that, the risk of not aligning is that organizations, and this is what I think I'm, already seeing, but I think we'll continue to see, is that an aspect of which we have to live with our decisions, right? So, decisions about, obviously a lot of companies have had to make really tough decisions during this pandemic about downsizing or shifting strategic focus, or changing sort of the rules and regulations, if you will, of operating, how they communicate within their company, how they, how they hire, and basically how they act. And if those decisions are made out of alignment with the culture of an organization, what we find is that, we tend to see lower levels of employee engagement. People don't feel, like I said, that connection to the sense of purpose, or the why, the continuity around how we do things here. And so those organizations are ripe for greater turnover. They're also, when we see lower levels of engagement, not only do we see lower levels of employee commitment, but we also see lower levels of productivity. And there's a really striking relationship between culture alignment, engagement, and all of the good things that we want to see in our organizations. On the flip side, we've been saying to organizations, and I've been talking a lot with companies and leaders, of course, during the pandemic, that if we slow down just enough to have the conversations that need to be had, to use our values as a filter and talk about the way our decisions are aligned or aren't aligned when necessary with those values, that we gain tremendous buy-in from our employees. And that serves as a huge protective factor when we look at not only, our employee base today, but the extent to which that they'll stay with us when we come out the other side.
Completely agree. And you mentioned in there communication, and that seems to be one of the biggest challenges for everyone, all of the leaders that I speak to on a daily basis. Have you found from speaking to your customers that it's been harder to communicate during this period? If so, how are you helping your own customers, and what advice would you give to everyone of how to communicate this? There's one thing knowing it. There's another thing actually communicating it, especially when you have employees all over the world in different circumstances, and everyone's being impacted differently.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And it's an interesting one during this pandemic, because, like I said, we've seen overall engagement levels rise during the pandemic, but then we've seen cultural alignment drop, which caused us to wonder what's happening. And one of the things that I think companies have done better during the pandemic than ever before is a greater frequency of communication. Now, they've been forced to, right? So we can't kind of count on the fact that we'll see each other in the office or coming around the bend in the hallway and can mention, something from colleague to colleague, or that the word will spread through the company during the day. And so we don't have to rely so much on broader communications. I'm not saying any of that was intentional, but that is and has been a reality of companies. And so once everybody went over, online or remote overnight, companies were really forced to communicate more. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're communicating in a culturally aligned way, though. And so that's really the focus, I think, for organizations today, is making sure that you're talking about your values. Again, it doesn't necessarily require more work, but it does require a focus. It does require intention, and there's really simple things to do. So, at our organization at Achievers, we talk about our values regularly. And now, of course, we're culture and engagement company, so that one would expect that. And we say that to ourselves: if we can't do this, we can't expect others to do it. But I'll say that when you do that, when again, keep your values simple, then it becomes easy once you have that mindset to comment on them and to weave them into your town halls, to your emails, to your communication, your conversations with employees.
What's an example
Because
of how you do that? What's a practical example?
yeah,
Because I'm sure everyone would love, completely agrees with you that they're probably wondering the what, the how, like, what does that look like? I know it's not, Just give us a simple example of how you do that.
Yeah. So one of the recommendations that I gave to my boss, our CEO, who's a culture and values zealot as well, is to take our values and to make sure that we're referring to at least one of our core values in every town hall. So we have a quarterly town hall inside of our company, and to make sure that we're speaking to one of our values in each one of those. So really simple. And then there's always plenty of opportunities,
To link it
to
in.
link
Yeah.
an action to a value.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, it's so important that we do that because a lot of times we can assume our employees are aligned and they're fully on board, but most of the time it's not the case as well. And especially now where we're all inundated with emails and notifications and Slack messages, it can become very difficult and to get through all of that noise and make sure you're connecting with people. And a lot of the CHROs I was speaking to, like Chris, I feel like I'm head of PR and comms for the last 8 months. I spend more time writing copy to like doing traditional HR, and they're really, really struggling. But also at the same time enjoying it and discovering new ways of doing it, etc. As well. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. And I think one of the things that I've always heard from your own customers, which they've loved over the last couple of months, is the ability to customize their communications depending on their audience, because you really want the information going to the person that they really need. For example, if you're talking about health and well-being, you want specific content going to that person, not everything as well. And that's been super useful. Otherwise it just becomes so much information that they don't even look at it because 80% of it's not even relevant to you. And I'm sure people listening, I remember working in companies like that before. It's like, well, this small percentage of this message is relevant to Chris, so I'm not even going to open it.
Yeah, exactly. Keeping it, I mean, I think the key is, and I know I've said it a couple of times, but it's for a good reason, keep it simple. So, the more we can keep it simple in terms of what's important and come back to those guiding principles, those core values, that's what people leave with, right? The details, right, often come and kind of go in one ear and out the other, or you see them and you lose them in a moment, especially right now when there's so much information. But values are really a great focusing mechanism, and if you talk about them, in your emails, you use them in your intranet, you include them, like I said, in a town hall or meeting, you just drop them everywhere with examples of how they're living in your company. Then that's what will stay with your employees, and that's what stays with all of us. That's what we remember.
Hmm. Another thing which I think is super important, I love to talk about is recognition, because again, when you were in the office, I feel like recognition happens a lot more organically, whether you kind of have that water cooler moment, say congrats Chris on that particular piece of work or project, and kind of organically happens. But I'm finding as we're more remote, recognition is something that's kind of lacked in quite a lot of organizations. And I think it's needed now more than ever as well. Talk about recognition in terms of how it serves as a function for driving alignment, like you discussed earlier.
Yeah, recognition is the single most powerful lever to drive engagement. And in fact, the Workforce Achievers Workforce Institute, we also published just this month a manager empowerment report, and that survey was conducted again just in the last quarter, so during the pandemic. And the number one ask from employees was recognition. So now, what's important, and in terms of this conversation we're having about culture, is that values-based recognition has far greater impact than generic recognition. And so I mean that if you really want to drive values-based behavior in your company, then it's really important to encourage not only recognition, but recognize behaviors that are aligned with your values. So for example, at our company, one team is one of our core values. So we have 5 core values, and one of them is one team. And that's that sense that we're all working together for the greater purpose. Our mission is to change the way the world works at Achievers. And so we're all jumping in whenever necessary to fulfill that. And that's this idea of one team. And so you'll see recognition sent out to cross-functional groups in our company all the time that solved, a customer challenge, or delivered, a piece of product of technology, or responded to, a request for a proposal that we see. The recognitions often are folks from sales and customer success and product and engineering and marketing and employee success. So from, from finance, from legal, all over the organization. And so, when we provide that recognition, when we see them all the time coming through our recognition feed at our company, then it's reinforcing the idea that it's important to us as a company that we are operating as one team. So recognition all by itself is important, but values-based recognition is critically important and also critically impactful.
Yeah, because it's going to continue to drive those behaviors that are aligned with your values, right? And you want to keep doing that, and it becomes more and more powerful. I think the only one thing you've done great is that in so many examples that goes unseen, and I
Mm.
love the fact that now, again, in this digital environment, everyone can see that.
And
And I
that's
think that
really
as a
important.
element,
Yeah.
mm, you're gone. Carry on. Sorry. Carry on. Yeah, I feel like so. Explain to everyone how to. I'm assuming you're using your own product internally.
Yeah, we do use
Right.
our own product. We use it so much that it's almost, a full-time job keeping up with our recognitions that are flowing through our feed. So we really drink our own champagne, so to speak. But I think, some of the important principles, whether you have, whether you have a recognition platform or not that you're able to use, some of the principles to really pay attention to are that recognitions are more powerful when they're real time. So when they occur in the moment or just after
Yeah.
the moment, which can be hard to do when you're busy, and but also that they're public. And that's why we use our platform as much as we do. And in any way that you recognize in your company, the more that you can make recognitions public, meaning share that thanks or that acclaim across your organization, we know that that's a really strong driver in terms of the impact of recognition, and then making it meaningful. So
Mhm.
real time, public, but meaningful. So not just, hey, thanks for, submitting that report, but thanks for taking the time to put those details in that really taught me about this concept we've been working on together. Or thanks for, pushing aside your coffee break to get on the phone with a customer today. And it really meant so much to them, which means so much to us. Those kinds of recognitions are the fuel for that engagement that
Yeah.
we all need.
I remember for me when I worked in sales, that was like meant more to me than actually getting a deal. Like having, knowing that my name came up on the board and the whole company could see it. And, the CEO is going to walk across the sales floor and shake my hand and say, well done. Strangely enough, that meant more to me than the actual doing a deal or the financial gain. And it stuck. That stuck with me, and I would get really excited about the recognition piece as opposed to actually the money that I made.
Isn't
um,
it amazing? It's like, I think it speaks to how, like, our most human quality, which is connection. And so we say to, leaders all the time that that's the case. And I think if we all just pause and think about ourselves, we can relate to what you just said, Chris. I certainly can. Right. That
mhm.
that what we really want is to know we're having an impact and to be seen in that way, and to know we're bringing value to people's lives.
Yeah.
And when we hear that, it doesn't take much for that to
Mhm.
really ring true.
But it's 10 times more impactful in a negative way when you don't. Because I remember moving to a different organization, doing something similar, and there was no recognition. And it really stood out to me because I'd been in a culture and an environment where that was something which was every manager acted that way, because it was, again, that was the culture of, we always make, even if it's the smallest win, we if it could be £1 million deal or £1,000 deal, we'll make the same amount of effort to really recognize that individual. And when I moved to another business and it was no recognition whatsoever, it was really disheartening, and I came more disengaged, etc. The productivity went down, everything that you're talking about. So I could see how that, I think we really take for granted how powerful it can be, or also impactful it can be as well.
Yeah, totally agree.
What are some of the what are some of the kind of things that you're looking at next year with the team and focusing now? I know you've obviously done these 2 recent reports. What's in the what's in the pipeline? What you're
Yeah.
focusing on? Can you reveal that live on
Yeah,
LinkedIn?
sure. Yeah, that's right. We're thinking, I mean, there is an overarching concept that we've been thinking a lot about, and we'll be diving into more in 2021,
Mhm.
which is the importance of having a culture of belonging. And so we've really, at Achievers and at the Workforce Institute specifically, we've been focusing on for several years the levers that drive engagement, right? So we've focusing on recognition. We've been focusing on manager empowerment. So I mentioned our manager empowerment report that just came out. We'll be continuing our work on manager empowerment in 2021. We've been also focused on workplace resilience. So how do you develop scaffolding to help your organization
That's huge.
thrive?
Yeah.
Yeah, but the overarching concept that I'm really excited about is, why are we doing any of that? Like, why are we doing all of that? At the end of the day, the truest measure of whether someone is thriving at work is the extent to which they feel they belong. When we feel like we belong, we are, we feel like we can be who we are. We're known in terms of what's unique to us and what we bring to the table. Just what we were talking about a second ago, Chris, in terms of what we get recognized for. But there's a really important human need to feel like we belong, and when we do in organizations, we thrive beyond all measure. And
Mhm.
so we're really going to be diving into that topic and understanding the relationship between the sense of belonging, so not being a generic person but being a known person, and that relationship between belonging and these all other outcome measures, like and how they impact these outcome measures like engagement or manager empowerment and such. So I'm
Mhm.
really excited about stepping into that in 2021.
Super exciting. And by the way, I love the fact that you continuously ask yourself, why are we doing this?
Mm.
Because you can do this work, but it's important to step back, right? Isn't it? And just be like, why are we doing this? The amount
Yeah,
of times I've
right?
done that, just like, I did that during COVID and said,
Mm.
like, this is a good time for us to step back as a business and just ask ourselves, why do we do and kind of go for everything? And there was a lot of things we just stopped doing. It's like, why were we doing this? And if it isn't aligned with, as you mentioned, that bigger vision and purpose, then just stop doing it. And I see many
Yeah.
companies.
And if there were ever a time, this would be it, right? To be, everything's up for grabs right now. And for me, in terms of my work and focusing on culture and engagement throughout my career, like I've come to that crossroads many times, not necessarily so much like, why am I doing this, but what really matters? Like what really matters to people? And I found myself going down that road before too, where I'm like writing about something. I'm like, okay, do we really do at the end of the day, do we really care about this? Or, speaking about belonging, one of the things that really drove me to get excited about this concept, and talking with colleagues about it, is that this focus we have on employee engagement is really important, right? Engagement is this measuring stick in terms of like, how are our people doing? And
Mhm.
yet in many organizations, it's become sort of like a number, a checklist. Like, hey, our company has an 80 on 80
Yeah, yeah,
engagement scores,
sure,
so
you're
we're
right.
good. When in fact, like, you could talk with plenty of folks inside any company where the organization has an 80 or even a 90, and people will say, yeah, but like, I'm having I'm not doing well. I'm having a hard time today, or because engagement's exceptionally fluid. And so it really forced me to say, like, how do we up level this conversation? How do we make it more meaningful, and move away from like a rote
Yeah.
measuring stick to really understanding how people are doing?
Mhm. The numbers really don't tell the full story, do they? Because, like, another thing I've been hearing a lot throughout this whole period, you mentioned it already, is like, yeah, engagements, sorry, productivity is at an all-time high, but in my mind, I'm like, at what cost? Because
Totally.
I can tell you right now, personally, I was working like crazy over the last 8 months, and if you looked at that on the spreadsheet, you'd be like, "Wow, Chris's productivity is amazing." But the toll that that took on my mental health, I was having anxiety attacks, I wasn't sleeping well, I wasn't eating well, but on paper, I'm performing through the roof.
Yes.
As well. So I get really worried when I see some of these reports or numbers, and I'm like, "Yeah, but at what cost?" And I feel like that's where it's really important that we equip our line managers with the right skills to be able to check on people and have those conversations. I've got employees that work at home on their own, and they were isolated, away from their support networks. And again, they're, I'm not going to mention the names, but I had an employee where his productivity was through the roof, but but when I actually sat down and had a one-on-one and had a conversation, I realized he was really suffering.
Mm.
And And it is that's what I worry about, Natalie, the most.
Yeah, and I think you're in good company. Like this is not like an isolated incident or situation. Folks feeling like my work output isn't necessarily aligned with my deeper well-being. And that's why we in our engagement platform we measure engagement drivers. One of our tools does, just like and like all engagement surveys and tools, there are a lot of different drivers, and so being able to be kind of push out your work is one, and there are many others, and so we don't sum across them because we lose data. So for example, we could look at your, like you said, productivity score and have make assumptions about how you're doing, and we would totally miss this huge issue that you're up against. And I think that's why I think this pandemic is really giving us an incredible opportunity to like kind of step out, not really step back, but step out and get a broader and wider view,
Hmm.
and understand more about what really helps people be at their best every single day at work. And right, having sort of losing your commute time and being able to work more, having less work life boundary in your life, we know has been a huge challenge for people, and it's had a tremendous impact on well-being.
Yeah.
And so I think that's part of why we had this great sort of moment of kind of challenging ourselves with, well, what really matters, and how do we get at what really matters for people. So
Mhm.
you're in good company there.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. We're all in it together anyway.
I know, I know. Yeah, you're right. Have you? I'm assuming you've seen like a huge increase in traffic, right, within the platform. I'm sure it's kind of gone through the roof.
Yeah, what's been interesting is so we look at, we've talked about the impact of manager recognition.
Yeah,
And then what we've been focusing on even more recently, and it's also came out of some of our research this year, is peer recognition as well. And we've always known, as an organization, we've always placed huge value on peer-to-peer recognition and social recognition. So this idea of, like, you don't have to our earlier part of our earlier conversation, you don't have to attach money to recognition for it to be powerful. And it doesn't have to come from your leader, although of course that's really impactful, but it can also come from the people around you. And so we've seen more of that focus during the pandemic. And I'd say, in addition, what we've seen is that organizations that were not thinking about, using a recognition platform um, prior to the pandemic, that are today, because what became very clear to, I think, many companies is that what they believed was their tool, their mechanism for providing recognition, like walking past someone's desk, like I said, and saying, "Hey, thanks for," not that those things aren't important, right? We need,
oh yeah, massively
we're human,
important. You can't
right?
do it.
But like having that exclusive focus on being able to do it in the
Yeah,
moment, running around the corner, has really been challenged. And so yeah, so we're seeing more organizations get really planful about, and about how to drive recognition. And of course, because people are remote, providing them with tools that they can easily use on online helps a lot. And one of the areas that we are focusing on, like I mentioned, is manager empowerment. In 2021 will be a huge focus for us. And one of the 4 factors that we've identified for how do we empower our managers. So not how do we, like, sort of hold them accountable, although of course that comes with it, but how do we empower them to support their people? And of course, recognition is one of those 4 factors. And so we're excited to help organizations do that and help managers do that in a more meaningful way.
yeah. I've definitely fell short on it as well because, again, normally because I'd see the team, it would be natural cues for me and kind of remind me to go and thank Ivan or Shane or Escher and do that. But then when in a virtual environment, there are no kind of social cues or to do that, and then you just don't do it all. So it's super important to have that, whether it's a nudge. Chris, have you recognized the team now, or whatever that may be? And again, it doesn't have to be financial, as you
Yes.
mentioned.
Yeah, I
But
think that's important.
yeah,
Yeah.
but saying thank you to someone doesn't cost anything. but it goes a long, long way.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, especially now. Like I remember even with my wife, she had her annual review last week, and just her coming off of that call with some positive praise
Mm,
from her manager meant the world to
gosh.
her. I could see it in her. She's super energized, so excited. Obviously, super nervous going in
Right.
to it. Oh my god, we fell behind because we've got our 2-year-old daughter running around causing
Mm.
chaos. Something has to give, and for myself and my wife, we've kind of fell short. We're not, no one's superhuman, and
Right.
something's going to give during this. But just taking a moment to, um, you know, just talk about the great things that her manager's seen in the work she's doing, and how not just like well done on achieving your work, but we're proud of you.
Mm.
And and that like that was it. I could see the energy, and she was like fired up to get back into work and
Yeah.
do everything as well. So you really, it's like it's incredible what the impact
Yeah.
you have on people.
It's really amazing. I just are we're today's the last day of school for I have 3 little girls, so I understand your
I can barely deal with
chaos
one.
you
I don't know how
describe.
you're doing
Yeah.
with three.
It's been interesting to say the least, and I'm waiting any moment for one of them to barge in here, but so far everyone's doing okay. But it's right. And so last night and yesterday and the last couple days I've asked them to write letters to their teachers for us to hand out with their, I guess not hand out, send with now
Mhm.
with their gifts this year. And I chatted with them about that, about how important it is to that 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 of course their teachers are going to appreciate getting a gift certificate, something they can use to buy themselves, something. These teachers need more praise and more gratitude than I think anyone during this pandemic.
100%.
But I shared with them that, but hearing from you, and even my 6-year-old, right, who's just like learning how to, just like figuring out how to write, learning from you, I mean, hearing from you and hearing, how much you appreciate them, that's more meaningful than any
Mhm.
gift card that we can give them. And so I just packaged up their letters and their pictures last night to drop off today. And I think it's just a reminder of that at our, if this pandemic has done anything, it's dropped us to our knees around what's important as a human, right? Connection. We've learned so much about what it means to be in isolation and how we're not designed for that, and so we're all making do the best we can, but yeah, thanking someone and showing gratitude is like you said, quite one of the easiest
Yeah.
tools we have, and it's
Yeah.
also one of the most powerful.
Just takes a little bit of time.
Yeah.
Even some of our customers sent me and Shane a few Christmas cards, handwritten Christmas cards from different places around the world, and it means so much when one of them was just saying, well done for sticking in there, because 80% of our business disappeared for our physical events, and they were like, I'm really happy for you, and just Merry Christmas, and that means so much. Like, we'll remember that, for a long time, and vice versa. Myself and Shane did a similar thing. We just kind of spent a few hours there, just sort of writing personal messages to people that really impacted us and helped us
Yeah.
through. And yeah, it doesn't cost a lot to do it. It just takes some time out to do it. I love the idea with the teacher, by the way. I'm going to steal that one. Although Robin's she's 2 years old, so I don't think she's writing any cards. But I'll
A picture. What do they say? A picture sends 1,000 words.
yeah, I'll do like a little like a hand paint print on
Yeah,
there
those
or
little
something like that.
Yeah. I was, my family and I were up skiing last weekend. That's one of the benefits of living in Colorado. And even in a pandemic, you can go ski. But and I was thought about a colleague that I have who's actually a senior leader. I'll mention his name, Bill Rock. He's been a colleague of mine for many, many years, and he runs, some of the largest ski resorts across North America. And he is notorious. He is just like a great example of sending handwritten letters. And I still have a little handwritten note that he sent me many, many, many years ago. And I have it on my desk. It was like 3 sentences where he just thanked me for some support I had provided. But it was handwritten. And it's a reminder. It's one of those reminders. And I just was thinking about him because we were up skiing. And so I sent him a text and just let him know that I was thinking about him. But it's a reminder of how powerful, like you said, that was a handwritten note sent many years ago, and it's still, it sits with me. And I'm as guilty as anyone of being challenged and finding time to send recognitions. We leaders at Achievers are often chiding ourselves for that, but it's a great sort of discipline that it takes to just be mindful and remember that it doesn't take much.
Yeah, that should be a good takeaway from today. If you're listening right now, take a moment to think about some of those people that have impacted you this year, or that deserve that recognition, and take an hour out of your day, write some notes, handwritten, not email,
Yeah.
or Slack,
Yes.
and send it to them. And I feel
Oh,
like we again, with so much technology as well, that's something we've lost. I feel the kind of the take someone, it's great getting recognition through software and app, and that's one thing, but getting a handwritten letter or a card is something different about that.
yeah. I
Um,
think so too. And if you do that, if you're listening, let Chris and I know. You can reach me on LinkedIn,
yeah,
and let us know. Share some of your stories about, I
exactly.
can guarantee you'll hear back from those folks.
Yeah, or like even we do see things sometimes where I know I said handwritten, but just doing a social media post across like LinkedIn and recognizing someone,
Mm,
right? And stuff like that's also super impactful because it just is sharing it with everyone, and that means
that's
so
right.
much, and it encourages more people to do the same as well. Like I've heard some, and not just for that, you can do recognition, but also for other things. Like I have friends that have written to some of their idols, and they've written
Mm,
a letter to them saying, thank you so much, your autobiography meant this much to me, and they've gotten replies, because it's very rare that someone takes the time to send a handwritten letter thanking you for something. But listen, I don't want to take too much more of your time, Natalie. Before we wrap up, if there's sort of we've covered quite a lot, a parting piece of advice, kind of what would that be? And then where can people connect with you? You mentioned LinkedIn. Is there anywhere else where can they learn more about the Institute and the other work that you do?
yeah. Well, I mean, the parting advice. I think this one we landed on of sharing recognition is
Yeah.
phenomenal. But kind of going back to culture, I'd say remember that culture, how you do things in your company, has a more profound impact on the engagement of your people and the performance of your company than most other factors. And that's true whether you're managing it or not. So get focused on culture, but keep it simple. This does not have to create more work for you. 4 to 6 values that speak to who you want to be as a company. And then make those that North Star that you're thinking about and talking about all the time. It actually becomes quite easy the more you do it, because it just becomes part of your vernacular, part of the way that you do business. So I would just encourage you all to work towards using in 2021 those values as a filter for everything you do. And if you do, you'll have a culturally aligned organization that can truly withstand any storm that comes our way. Please do reach out to me if you have any questions that I can answer. Like I said, you can reach me on LinkedIn. And if you want to nerd out more about culture and see the Workforce Institute thought leadership as it hits the presses, subscribe to the Workforce Institute on the Achievers website, and
Mhm.
we'll share that kind of those insights that we
We'll put a
gain and
link
that
in the chat
research
as well.
along the way.
We'll put a link in the chat right now for anyone who wants the link um,
Great.
as well. But look, thanks so much, and for everyone listening.
Thanks,
Um,
Chris.
we appreciate you all joining us. It's been a pleasure, Natalie. And if you're new here, please like, comment, share, tag in a colleague that you feel would gain value from today's show as well. We want to share the knowledge experience with as many people as possible. Apart from that, enjoy the rest of your day, everyone, and week. And if we don't see you before then, have a good new year and
Yeah.
Christmas. Hopefully next
Thanks
year
so
will
much,
it
Chris.
can't be any worse, surely. And then we've gone through and make sure you go and connect with Natalie on LinkedIn as well. But bye for now, Natalie. See you later.
Bye bye. Happy holidays.
You too. Bye.